The Bengals plan to tag Tee Higgins, what it means for Tee, his future in Cincinnati, and why this was inevitable. That and much, much more right now on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to Cincinnati Bengals Talk. I'm James Rapien of BengalsTalk.com, and let's dive into what is probably going to be an audio-only edition of Cincinnati Bengals Talk. And that's the beauty of subscribing to this podcast, following this podcast wherever you listen, and wherever you're listening right now, whether it's Apple, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Amazon. If you're new, if you just found us, stumbled into us, I'm James Rapien. I've covered the Bengals for really the past 5 years, and really for the better part of a decade. But over the past 5 years, I've covered them for Bengals on SI, BengalsTalk.com. That's an SI site. And here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk, we're a YouTube channel that started in 2021 during the Jamar Chase draft. One of the big things was Sewell versus Chase. We were in on that, and we're up to 53,000 subscribers on that side of things. But this is an audio only because I wanted to give some context, some insight into my report today for BengalsTalk.com. And it's one that has a lot of fan bases, I think, either scratching their head or slamming their fist down or being very angry about things. And that's that the Bengals plan on franchise tagging Tee Higgins if they can't get a long-term deal done. And the reason the report, and I'm going to get into details, as much detail as I can about what I've known, how I've known it, all of the things in between, kind of a tell-all type of scenario. And again, I think it's something on this audio platform that you're not going to hear me talk about anywhere else. And so wanted to give you a little context on that, because tagging Tee Higgins to me was a no-brainer. It's something last week that I wrote for BengalsTalk.com. I did a video on it for Cincinnati Bengals Talk. You heard audio when I was discussing the different scenarios here of what could happen with Tee. And it's pretty simple. You have a 26-year-old star receiver who's the best free agent in this class. You can tag him for $26.18 million, which is a rough estimate of what it'll be. It's a very close estimate, rather, not a rough estimate of what it'll be. It may change a little bit, but it's going to be $26 million that they can tag him for. And so it's a no-brainer. The fact that this surprised some fan bases is because they don't pay attention, or they just really don't want to believe the reality of the situation. There isn't a team in the NFL, whether they have Jamar Chase or not, Joe Burrow or not, there isn't a team in the NFL that would not tag Tee Higgins. You 100% have to tag him. And I think a lot of Bengals fans, and certainly listeners and viewers of Cincinnati Bengals Talk, or if you listen to me and Jake Lisco on Locked On Bengals or watch us on Locked On Bengals, I think that's the other side of it, is you're informed, you understand it, you got it from the get-go, and boom, there you go. At the same time, I look at the situation and I see everyone that says, oh, well, this has got to be a tag and trade. This has got to be a tag and trade. There's no way they're going to tag him for a second year. I can't believe they're going to do that to him. Free T. And I got to be honest. I'm not sure T is all that upset when he saw that report from me. I think he's aware of it. I think his camp is very aware of it. And the goal is still the goal. And the goal has been the goal since Joe Burrow making the comments he did after the Bengals beat the Cowboys on Monday Night Football, when he said, oh yeah, we have a plan to keep T. I expect to keep T. And then that was Monday. And then he talked again Wednesday. And I asked him, so is T a need? Because he said you have needs and wants. And obviously their season was basically over at that point. And he said, oh yeah, T is a need. And I asked him about his value and what he meant and all of those things. He was like, it doesn't even always show up in the box score. It's just the attention he brings, the gravity he has, the impact that he has. T is a need. And since then, literally the past 2 months has been oh man, they better keep T. And I think part of that's because there's been a plan. And the plan started behind the scenes before Joe made those comments, when Tee Higgins was in the process of switching agents. And I think when you combine that with the fact that the Bengals view it very similarly, I think, to what the average Bengals fan does. You look around and you're looking around the roster, you're looking on the depth chart, and you're like, well, we got to pay some of these guys. We got to spend money. We got to find a way to be good and be in. Yeah, they might not have planned to pay Tee Higgins a year ago at this time, but are there many scenarios where you let the fourth best player on your roster leave and you're better in 2025? And that's why I've said from the jump, I mean, literally from the jump, going into this offseason, I expect them, not hope, not think they could, not, oh, well, yeah, maybe if they can juggle with with one hand behind their back and blindfolded, standing on a ladder. Like, you don't need to be an acrobat to get these deals done. And so my expectation is that they get all three done. A long-term deal for Jamar Chase, a long-term deal for Trey Hendrickson, at least a multi-year extension for Trey Hendrickson, and a long-term deal done for Tee Higgins. Yeah, that's my expectation. I feel like that's what great teams would do. Like that's what smart teams would do. I feel like that's what Super Bowl contenders with a franchise quarterback, and not just a franchise quarterback, an MVP level quarterback, a quarterback that you could argue, especially after what Patrick Mahomes did, is the best quarterback in the NFL in Joe Burrow. Yeah, that's what they do. And so that's what I expect the Bengals to do. You may laugh at it. You may think, hey, James, you're naive. You're ridiculous. You shouldn't feel that way. That's what I expect them to do. And this tag is just the first part of that. This tag needed to be, it needed to be out there, I would say. And I think Tee Higgins' side already knew it. I think the Bengals have known it for quite some time. Quite frankly, I feel like I've known it for quite some time. And so the fact that it's out there now, people can kind of accept it. The Bengals will tag, franchise tag Tee Higgins if they need to by March 4th, that deadline at 4 p.m. Maybe it comes earlier to help negotiations move along. I think there's a scenario, certainly an argument you could make for that, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be the case. But when Tee Higgins switched agents, I think that opened a door. I think Joe Burrow's comments have kept that door wide open, and I think the Bengals have been on board really throughout this process over the past few months. So I want to dive into some of that as well. That includes Joe Burrow's comments, because I think a lot of people read what Joe Burrow has said or have seen what Joe Burrow has said. Like, I've reacted to it plenty. And it's like, man, message sent. You call out those cheap bastards in the front office. And it's not necessarily that simple. And I get it. I get the fight the powers that be type of logic, but it isn't. So let's get into that. We will, coming up next. All right, let's dive into the powers that be. Because I think a lot of people, like I said, have Joe Burrow, and they see what Joe Burrow has said. Tee Higgins is a need. You can't let that guy get out of the building. All of those things. And it's like, man, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're calling out the front office. The front office, how are they going to respond? Joe Burrow's pulling a power play. And that was my reaction early on. I actually think this is all part of the plan. And not the calling out the front office part. Like, I think Joe is trying to keep pressure on the front office and on the Bengals to make sure that they follow through, make sure that they get it done. But I think the Bengals, at some point during the season, were evaluating the roster, evaluating their future cap, evaluating their future cash, looking at this free agent class. And literally, Tee Higgins and Trey Hendrickson would be the first and second best free agents in this class. Now, you could argue because of Trey's age, he'd be a little lower than Milton Williams. You could argue that. 17 and a half sacks in each of the past 2 years. Like, would be a heck of a free agent addition, right? And he's under contract for another year. Tee Higgins is the number one free agent, 26 years old, career high 10 touchdowns. Oh, but James, he only played 12 games this past year. Yeah, he deals with soft tissue injuries. I get that. He does. There's no doubt about it, right? Quad, hamstring, all of those things. I thought T leveled up in 2024. I did. Watching him at camp, he just felt bigger, stronger, more opposing. Physically imposing, excuse me, not opposing. Physically imposing, just the way he was carrying himself on the field. And then I watched him when he actually got on the field, because he missed the first couple of games. And he gets on the field and struggled in that Commanders game because it was his first game back. And then after that, it was like, oh, man. If Joe Burrow needed a first down, he threw to T. If If Joe Burrow couldn't get the ball to Jamar, well, Tee was open. 73 catches, over 900 yards, career high 10 touchdowns. It felt like every single one of his catches went for a first down, was really tough and physical over the middle, was fighting for every yard to get the yak afterwards, was really good after the catch. I thought he was really strong at the catch point. All of these things, it felt like he was more, so much so that you had Mike Tomlin calling him Shaq. Got to use your fouls against Shaq. And that was also a hint. And that was maybe a little too direct, too blunt. But the moment Mike Tomlin said that, it was like, oh yeah, well, the Steelers are in on Tee. And we know the Patriots were in on Tee. Chargers would have been in on Tee. You had Trevor Lawrence on Monday on the Kay Adams show. Literally, Jake Lisco told me the Kay Adams show posted a clip of Trevor Lawrence in his recruitment of Tee, like how he would recruit his former college teammate. They played together for a couple of years at Clemson. How he would recruit him to Jacksonville in free agency. And then my report dropped, like right after. And it's just like, yeah, they're not going to let all of these teams. You think they want to see Tee Higgins go to Tennessee and catch passes from whoever the hell is going to play quarterback and reunite with Brian Callahan? Like, they don't want that. They want to keep him here. And when you look at this free agent class, you look at the demand that Tee Higgins was getting from the rest of the league, even if the Bengals had planned, and I do think that at one point, fairly recent, they kind of accepted that, yeah, Tee Higgins is probably going to sign elsewhere. When the whole league, it feels like, is looking at your receiver, besides like a few teams, like literally a few, you could name, like if I go, I'm going to pull up, I'll just pull up NFL standings. Like the Bills could use Tee Higgins. The Dolphins, probably not. They're paying 2 receivers. The Jets could certainly use Tee Higgins if they get a young quarterback in there. Their cap's all messed up. But the point is like from a football standpoint, well, the Bills could certainly find a way to do it. The Jets probably couldn't, but they would love him. The Patriots would love to pay Tee Higgins right now. The Chiefs, I think, would love to pay Tee Higgins. The Chargers, Broncos, Raiders, the entire AFC West would line up to pay Tee Higgins. The AFC North, Tee Higgins would be the number 1 receiver in Baltimore, the number 1 receiver in Pittsburgh, and the number 1 receiver in Cleveland. So I'm sure they would love to pay Tee Higgins. Houston, maybe the number 2 there, but they could use a really good number 2. So yeah, that makes sense. The Colts, probably not in the Tee Higgins market, but maybe Jags and Titans. Oh, okay. Is that everybody in the, that's literally all but like 2 teams in the AFC that you're like, yeah, could definitely see them making a run. I haven't looked at the cap to see for each team who would and who wouldn't. Point is, a lot of teams would be interested. And that's just the AFC. Look, the NFC, well, yeah, the Commanders would be ideal suitors, I would say, for Tee. Cowboys probably can't make it work cap-wise. The Giants, probably not, but never know, especially if they have a rookie quarterback and a rookie receiver like Malik Nabers on a rookie deal. The Rams, never say never with them. They always feel like they're in the mix. I doubt it with the Seahawks, but never say never. Arizona could. San Francisco could. The Lions, probably not. The Vikings, no. The Packers, absolutely. The Bears, probably not, but I wouldn't necessarily rule it out, but probably not. Tampa Bay, oh my God, could you imagine Mike Evans and Tee Higgins on the same field? That would be wild. Atlanta would make sense. Carolina would make sense. I think the Saints could absolutely use Tee Higgins. The point is most of the league would love to pay 6'4", 220 Tee Higgins. And the Bengals probably viewed that, looked at that, and then looked at their roster, and then looked back at the league, and then looked at the free agent class and said, yeah, maybe we should pay Tee. Maybe we should pay Tee. And then they're like, yeah, but can't get a deal done with David Mulligetta for whatever reason. It just hasn't worked, negotiating-wise. That's why Tee Higgins switched agents. Wants to be in Cincinnati. It's a big reason why. And no, Tee hasn't told me that. You just got to read the tea leaves, pun intended. Read the tea leaves. He was about to make it to free agency, and he knew he'd probably get tagged, and he wanted to stay in Cincinnati anyway. And he knew that his current agent at the time, David Mulligetta, probably would have said, no, let's demand a trade and get you the hell out of there and get you paid. And he's like, yeah, I want to get paid, but I'd probably rather stay in Cincinnati and not make it really, really ugly. David said, no, I'm going to make you one of the highest paid receivers. And then it goes back and forth, and boom, they break up. Because I think Tee wants to be paid very well. I also think Tee really likes it in Cincinnati and doesn't want to go out kicking, screaming, clawing, scratching, and make it a huge thing about him. And so it's not just about being in Cincinnati. I think he'd be happy in a lot of these places that I just named. But switched agents for a reason. Door goes from cracked to open, and now the breeze breaks the door off the hinges and the door is wide open. It's up to the Bengals to get it done. That's it. It's up to the Bengals to get it done. And we will see if they do. But that's where I'm at on this entire thing. Is it's like, yeah, Tee Higgins makes a ton of sense, fits the offense. You can make it work from a cash cap, resource wise, and he's really, really good. Like, I really think Tee Higgins' best football is ahead of him. I don't think we've seen it yet. The what I saw from him in camp, I was convinced he was going for double-digit touchdowns, which he still did, and 1,200 yards. He missed 5 games and had 900-plus yards. Would have gotten there. Would have gotten there with just a few more games. I mean, he would have had another big game in him. He had that Denver game. He would have had another big game in him like that out of those other 5. Oh, I also meant to mention the Bengals, 8-4 when Tee Higgins played last year in 2014, or in 2024, excuse me. 8-4. Pretty good. Pretty good. Do the math without him. They finished 9-8. Yeah, it wasn't nearly as good without him. They were 1-4 without him. So, including some big losses. I mean, they lost. And by the way, one of those losses was the Commanders game when he was just getting back. But the big loss without him, that Chiefs game, obviously the New England game, either if he's on the field for either of those games, I feel like it goes the other way. Because I think they would have gotten a key first down against the Chiefs that they needed, different momentum spots. And then I think early on against the Patriots, when they were easing into this offense and Joe was not fully back with the wrist, that, just getting comfortable, feeling things out, I think T would have made a play to get them into a rhythm, and they would have done enough to win that game. But this is a good thing. The Bengals want to get a long-term deal done with T. I think he wants to be in Cincinnati. Will they get it done? We'll see. But Tee Higgins, they plan on franchise tagging him before that March 4th deadline if they don't get a long-term deal done. And the plan is much different this year than last year. I guess that's the other thing that I should get to. Why else does it feel different? What's changed? Well, everything that I said. From the way the league views him, I think the league views T as a much different player now than last year overall. And part of that's because of the lack of wide receivers available. It certainly matters. And so his market to me is much stronger now. I also think just the way he played this year, you're like, man, that dude can be a 1. And that's why the Patriots and Patriots fans were hoping that they landed him. That's why a lot of these teams are like, man, Tee Higgins. He's been a number 1 his whole life. And he came to Cincinnati and he's like the 1A. I wouldn't even call him a number 2. He's the 1A. This offense revolves around Burrow, Jamar, T. It's built for those guys. That's why you don't lose one. That's why you can't lose one. And that's why the Bengals are tagging T again. And in their minds, working on a long-term deal and hopefully signing him to a long-term deal. T, I hope you get paid. And as far as what I think the deal could be, I guess we could end here. As far as a long-term extension, 4 years, $106 million is where I would look at it to be. I think that's a good number. $26 million. It's one of those things, or what is it? No, that's $27 million. Excuse me. So you get to that $27 million mark, $26.5 million mark. Excuse me, and there you go. I was doing math in my head on the run. It's like, all right, because basically I was talking to a few people. My guy Andre Parada was one of them, and I was talking to a few people, and it's like, yeah, I had him at 4 for 100, and then I saw PFF's projection 4 for 112. And I was like, I'm gonna split the difference, 4 for 106. And so there you go. That's why my math was like, wait, what is it? What was that again? It's $1.5 million more per year, James. Do the math, 106. So yeah, 4 years, $26.5 million per year. Could totally see that getting it done. Maybe he goes with a 3-year deal, by the way. Could see that. Maybe he says, I want to be a hit free agency sooner. Let's go 3 years, $88 million or $86 million or $85 million. Could see that too. We will see. But hope you enjoyed this. Probably just an audio only version of the podcast. Maybe it shows up on YouTube, but regardless, thank you so much for watching Cincinnati Bengals Talk on YouTube. Make sure you follow wherever you get your podcasts right here on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and check out bengalstalk.com as well. I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for listening to Cincinnati Bengals Talk.